Welcome to Craft Chat Chronicles, the go-to podcast for tips on crafting best-selling fiction. At Craft Chat Chronicles, we bring you expert interviews, insights, and tips on writing, publishing, and marketing. Join the conversation and embark on a new chapter in your writing journey. For workshops, show notes, and more information, visit J.D.Myall.com. That's J.D.Myall.com.
On today's double episode of Craft Chat Chronicles, we'll have a brief chat with author Denny S. Bryce, author of titles like Can't We Be Friends, The Other Princess, Wild Women in the Blues, and many more. Denny will talk about her writing and publishing journey. She'll speak about being a member of Drexel's faculty and a little bit about the MFA process, author marketing. And then she'll give you some brief facts on her novel, Can't We Be Friends? And then after that, we'll go into a deeper dive of demystifying the MFA process and talking about the thesis packet and writing craft and publishing and market trends with author and agent Eric Smith, better known as Eric Smith Rocks. Stay tuned. You're in for a great show. How are you today? Welcome, Denny.
I am fantastic. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Can you tell everybody a little bit about your publishing journey and how you came to Drexel and all that good stuff?
I certainly can, because I love talking about myself. Well, I'll say this because it is a long journey. I started writing for fun when I was running my PR and marketing firm. And that was around the turn of the century, around 2000. And I was a big fan of a TV show by the name of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So when I came home after traveling or doing whatever I did with my marketing and PR day job or day company, I would write fan fiction. And I was a big fan of the show, as I mentioned, and I just got into it. And then one of the writers, because we all wrote online with, mysterious names, pen names and what have you. But one of the writers was a gal who was in an organization called Romance Writers of America. And she suggested to me that I join her on one of her, annual conferences. And I did, had a great time, hung out with writers there, and then started hanging out with writers in my backyard. At the time, I was living in Washington, D.C. Now I live in Savannah. But I joined some chapters, some writing groups, and what have you. But I really wasn't committed to writing professionally because I had a big company to run. And I was busy. But then I got obsessed with writing, and I wanted to do it better. I wanted to do it more. And I had an opportunity to enter a bunch of contests, and I started winning contests, and that sort of gave me a little bit of confidence. And from there, I found an agent in 2016. So you see, I spent a lot of years, Then in 2000, and I think it was the year after I got an agent, I decided that I wanted to write. I wanted to be a full-time author. So I put both my feet in the pond, so to speak, and retired from the world of full-time marketing and PR so that I had more time to write. And that's when I sold my first book in 2019. It is called, over there, there's a poster called Wild Women in the Blues. Then I went from there to several other books. And now next Tuesday, I have another book coming out. But as part of that journey, I also had met Anne Garvin of several years in there someplace. She was teaching something in Philly. I got to hang out with her and that group that was there that included Nomi Eve.
That's all copywriters? Is that what you're referring to?
Oh, absolutely. And so, but this is when I was pre-published. I was
Mhm.
still just sort of like just traveling around the globe trying to find writing classes and what have you. And that relationship was just so important because I kept track of both of these women over the years.
Mhm.
And then when the opportunity came for me to join Tall Poppies, I also got involved with working with Nomi and Drexel University. I've been working with Drexel, I'd say, for 3 years
Mhm.
approximately, maybe a little longer. And it's been a very rewarding experience. And I'm looking forward to continuing to teach the class and also do the coaching. I love interacting one on one with MFA students. Um, it's just really a joyful opportunity to work with young writers. And age is not what I'm talking about. It's just, where you are in the journey, so to speak.
So, with your history in marketing, when you look at your students, what tips do you usually give them on marketing themselves as a writer?
Interestingly enough, one of my first classes for Drexel was a class on marketing for authors. And right away, I'm a big fan of visibility.
Mhm.
In this day and age, if you are intending to have others read your book and buy your books, whether you choose the indie path or the traditional path to publication, people got to know you. You got to find your brand, and then have visibility. And you don't necessarily have to wait until the day you sell your book. Uh, to me, once your commitment is there for your career, start building your brand, start your website, um, communicate, find a format, a platform or two or three that you enjoy. I think that's a first step. You in the early stages of marketing and public relations as an author, don't get into something that feels overwhelming. And in this day and age, at the same time, don't turn your back on social media because you feel uncomfortable. It's part of what we have to do.
Love that. When you're looking at your students' work in the packet exchanges, what are
Mhm.
the areas that it seems like students struggle the most with, and how could they improve?
Well, I will be quite frank that it's different for every student, and that's honestly the way I feel. There's no cut and dry one path problem for
Mhm.
any student. What I mostly run into is confidence, the confidence to stick to the story that they're committed to, and working with them to enhance where they are versus change what they're trying to accomplish. I think that's critical with writing because it's such an organic place
Mhm.
as an artist. You are an artist, and trying to tell an artist what their art should be is not my job. My role in that communication is to really encourage, support, and yeah, if there's a grammar thing, we can work on that. If there's a structure, a story structure thing, we will work on that.
Mhm.
If you are looking by the end of your MFA program to get your work out and find if you're going traditional to an agent, if and how do you shape your game plan if you're going indie, because that's still running your own business. So those are the sort of interactions I like to have with students that I coach. We're going to work on that project so that that thesis or whatever you want to call it, your story, so
Mhm.
that when it's ready when it's being called for submissions, it's ready. But we're also talking about your industry, your career, what's going on in publishing that I like to share with people, since I'm, as a book critic and some of the other things that I do, I'm very much about having authors be very in touch and in tune with the industry. Um, and it's not about following trends, it's about understanding what's going on in the marketplace.
And what is going on in the marketplace right now? Any tips for people?
Any tips? It's dominated a lot. I'd say create a vision board. I'm very much a fan of a vision board. If the New York Times is on your vision board, look at what is happening there and not redo what you're doing to match what it's doing, but understand it's cyclical. I mean, 6 months ago on the New York Times bestseller list, you saw Colleen Hoover over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're seeing the romantasy is what they're calling it, but romance fantasy or romantic fantasy has been around forever.
Mm-hmm.
But when something catches, and there's a new catch word to define it, like romantasy, there's that popularity that's happening. And you're seeing in traditional fiction more and more um, um, editors and your big five and whomever's out there buying romantasy, but they're also there's a focus on debut authors. Debut authors are an opportunity for publishing to put a big push behind a new author that doesn't have a track record that's a little fuzzy or messy, unless you do things. There's been one author that sort of messed up that opportunity, but she's a YA author. I won't go into that. But so those opportunities are there for indie authors. Understand the business of that end of being in indie publishing. Yes, you must write your best possible book, but you also must understand how to launch that book. You also must pull together a team of professionals who can help you put out the best product possible. I interact with quite a few indie authors, and there's great opportunity out there, especially if you're a romance writer, especially if you're a fantasy writer, especially if you're writing contemporary, heartfelt contemporary, and with romance elements. So knowing genres and being nosy online about what's happening in publishing will help.
I love that. Why should students choose an MFA program, and why Drexel?
Well, everything that I know about Drexel it's just one of the top MFA programs out there. Number one, you want a top program, one that's respected, one that if you name drop, people are sitting back. Oh, I love that when it happens. Oh, I'm an adjunct professor at Drexel. Oh yeah, I've heard of their MFA program. So I like that. That's always helpful. For students today, it just makes you more competitive as a writer to have that skill set in your hand. And that is more mastery of your craft, more knowledge about your craft, more confidence, and understanding what are the best paths to follow to achieve your writing journey goals. And that knowledge, and with the team that the department has pulled together, you just have so much opportunity to learn and understand the vehicles that you need to use to be a success.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Your new title that's coming out, Can't We Be Friends? In closing, can you push that so they can race to the bookstores and buy it, because this will come out after the 5th?
Comes out in a few days. We're very excited. This is my first co-authored book. So the name of the book is Can't We Be Friends, but it's the story of the friendship between Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe. And my friend Eliza Knight and I started working on this book in 2019. And so actually we just recorded an interview for like 5 minutes before I got in talking with you. So we're very excited about the book. We're very excited that it's about to be released. We worked on it for 5 years. We sold it, and so happy days.
Was that hard, co-writing?
Co-writing is different. It is a challenge. Now, Eliza has many more books than I do. I have 5 books out now with this one or with the next one. And she has maybe 60. Okay. So she has a style, a work style. I have a work style. But the fact that we were able to focus on story and merge our goals for the book helped us make it a more seamless process, because I can imagine that sometimes it can get pretty hairy because I'm a slow writer, she's a fast writer. I'm a, I will noodle something, and I really like playing with themes. I have more of a literary bent. She has a lot of romance background. So meshing those 2 areas was something we were very effective at doing, but we both understood what type of work we were looking to deliver to readers.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you.
And thank you for having me. And I hope this worked out.
It did. Today we're going to be talking to Eric Smith. Eric Smith rocks, a renowned literary agent with PS Literary. He's an author of titles like With or Without You, and he's an educator at Drexel University. Today, Eric will be helping us demystify the packet exchange process. He'll offer craft advice and insight to help you elevate your writing. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You actually spoke when I graduated at Drexel.
Oh, excellent.
You weren't teaching a class yet, though, so I didn't get to be in your class.
Oh, yes, I remember that. There was at the Push to Publish thing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, excellent.
What factors do you think prospective students should consider when choosing an MFA writing program?
Ooh. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of friends who are aspiring writers who ask for advice pretty often. It's kind of what happens when you're the literary agent in the group of friends. And I always tell them to make sure you're researching the teachers in the program, right? Like that's the thing you are looking for. You're looking for the professors who actually have the experience, who have been published, who work in the industry, who are still actively doing those things, that are going to give you advice that's, I guess, applicable and relevant to what you're pursuing. So take a look at the teachers. I feel like Drexel is pretty fortunate with the wonderful faculty that we have there. That's for sure.
Very true, very true. Oh, well, no, I'll stay in order. I'll come to that later. I might as well jump. I already jumped.
Please.
You do these workshops on your website sometimes, and you had one for nonfiction proposals. Are you going to do one for fiction proposals?
No, I haven't done one for fiction proposals. Mostly because I think if you are writing fiction, and you're a debut author, the book has to be finished, right? So there's almost no point to do a fiction proposal. Nonfiction's different, where like if you're writing nonfiction and you're an expert in your field, you can pitch on proposal where it's just the not quite finished manuscript, and the idea, because the publisher is supposed to give you an advance so you can finish your book and do your research. So probably not yet, but I do query letter workshops, which I think are sometimes helpful.
Okay, cool. How do workshops in MFA programs function, and what are the benefits and challenges to that model?
I mean, it depends on the MFA program, but for the most part, it's a lot of sharing and critique and back and forth, right? You're swapping your manuscript or sometimes short stories and essays, depending on what you're doing, with your critique partners, with your professors, and just polishing it up as much as you can, while learning a lot along the way. I love it when I get an MFA student who wants to write children's books, for example. I occasionally get someone who's writing a middle grade book or a young adult book, and I'm reading their prose and it's feeling way more adult. So there's that fun extra benefit of saying, well, here's some homework. Here's some novels that I love. Here's some things that have inspired me. Here's some craft books. So you're learning along the way and figuring out where your voice belongs and how to hone your voice as you're doing that critique and workshopping.
Love that. How does the package exchange process work for you from the moment of introduction to the student till the last comment and critique you give them?
Oh yeah, I mean it's just a lot of I wish I could give a more glamorous answer here, right? But it is a lot of emailing back and forth, right? So generally the student will send me their packet in progress. Sometimes it's a chapter, sometimes it's the entirety of the packet, sometimes it's a whole 25,000 words, depends on where we're at. And we go back and forth. I give it a look, I check out their edits, I check out what they've recently written, I give them lots of notes, I send it back to them. I usually give them a week to sort of I don't know, take in all the edits and read through them and develop questions, and then we have a check-in. I'm hopping on a Zoom or a phone call, or if the student happens to live in Philly, meeting in person, like every 3 weeks to chat over and answer any questions that they've got. I sort of firmly approach it from the perspective of this is their book, this is their story. I'm just trying to help them tell the best version of it, right? So like if the edits don't work for you, it's okay. It's all right. Like we're not going to have a problem. But ideally, I'm helping you get it in the shape that will one day get it published.
Love that too. So in a situation with yourself, what advice would you give students in helping the process run smoothly and, making and helping themselves get the best and the most out of it?
Ooh, just be as open to criticism as you can be. I know it can be hard. I know it can feel, oh goodness, it can feel like an attack on who you are sometimes. Like I write very personal stories. Sometimes when I get critiques on them, I'm like, hey, you don't know me, but we are trying to tell you, we are trying to help you tell the best version of your story. Also get critiques and get workshops outside of working with your professor and outside of your potential cohort, right? Turn to your friends, like it's not just a bubble where you're only working with potentially me or potentially the couple of friends in your MFA program. Look elsewhere too. Work with your friends. I can't tell you how much getting that outside perspective can really help.
Now, with my packet exchange, like I found all the teachers incredibly helpful.
Oh, good.
Sadika Johnson was really, really good with like developmental edits. And Heather Christie was really good with detail and helping you bring out the setting. What do you think your strengths are as a packet exchange teacher?
Oh, I mean, I think my strengths are certainly voice. In my agent life, I work on children's books, I work on adult books, I work on lit fic, I work on fantasy, I work on sci-fi, I work all over the place. So I'm really in tune with what voice should feel like based on the genre or category that you're writing in.
Mhm.
Um, I am also a bit of a brat when it comes to things like world building and motivation. So, like, you're gonna get some nitty-gritty, sort of complainy questions from me when you're working on a book that has, high fantasy elements or big world building bits. I'm gonna ask a lot of whys, and it might get annoying. But remember that there has to be a reason for everything. I once went to a book launch for a fantasy author friend of mine, and she was talking about how when she was working with her editor on her fantasy novel, her editor kept asking her questions like, well, why can this person do this magic? Or why are there two moons in the sky? Or why is water doing X and Y? And her answer was always just like, well, just because. It's not a reason, right? You can't do that. That's not okay. That's why that editor ripped apart that book and why that book turned out to be so great later. So, yeah, gonna ask a lot of whys.
In your view, what are the elements that make a first page of a manuscript stand out?
Ooh, a first page? Oh, that's so hard. Um, oh boy. So first page, I think the big thing I look for in a first page is voice, right? So like I can tell right away if the voice isn't right for the category or the genre or what the story they're trying to tell. Um, that's the thing that's going to stand out the most to me. It's a little different when you talk about like first chapters, right? Because like first chapters, you're looking for stakes, motivation. You're looking to get to know the character. You're looking to get grounded in the setting. You're looking for all those big things.
Mhm.
But that first page, that first impression, it's voice for sure.
How do you suggest students avoid the saggy middle?
Oh no. That's a hard question because I get to that in every single one of my books. Every book that I write, when I'm at about like 35,000 words, that's when I'm like, I've never written a book before. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. This is terrible. I think the thing that helps is your critique partners, and it's your cohort, it's your friends that are reading it, it's the professor you're working with. When you're outside of the program, it's certainly just your critique partners because they're the ones that are going to give you the kick in the pants that says, keep going. Like there's something here, you need to keep going. When you're going on your own and you're hitting that middle point, it's really hard to find that motivation to keep going at it. And I hit that middle point with every book I write. And that's usually the point where I turn to my critique partners. I'm like, hey, is there something here? Should I keep going? Like, do I scrap this and work on something else? And sometimes I get brutally honest feedback. And that's why there's a lot of half-finished books on my hard drive. But you need that. You need that.
What can you tell writers about crafting a compelling ending?
I think the best endings don't try to tie everything up in a little bow, right? Like it can be really tempting to be like, all right, I got to the ending. Now here's an epilogue where I show everybody being happy. Or, here's a wedding scene 1 year later. And like you don't always need that, like real life doesn't always end in a nice shiny bow. So stick to what feels real, right? Stick to what you feel like would actually happen. Um, like I don't know. I always struggle with a book where like the main character is in like a race or something, and then at the end they win. Really? That doesn't happen all the time. Like second place is still okay, like I try to stick with the realism. Your readers will appreciate it. They won't feel like they're being pandered to. I just recently did a podcast where we were talking about the endings to some of my books, and like I stick with the realistic endings with my books, and some people don't like that, but I don't know. That's what life is like.
What makes a good villain?
Oh, a good villain has good motivation. Like they think they are the good guy in their own story, right? That's what a good villain is. Um, I'm like looking at my own books again. I'm like, who are the bad guys in my books? Like I in one of my books, You Can Go Your Own Way. It's a cute little rom-com for the most part, but one of the characters, her father, is like a tech mogul with tons of money who thinks he's a good guy because he's restoring buildings and he's buying properties and he's putting new things in there, but he's actually gentrifying neighborhoods and he's not really welcome in these spaces. But he doesn't know that. He thinks he's the good guy. He thinks he's doing something right. So a good villain thinks they're doing the right thing. I feel like Marvel movies do a really good job of this. I don't know. I don't know who my fellow nerds are that are listening to this right now, but like most Marvel villains think they're doing something good and they have really great motivation and I like the way that they're written. And DC villains, oh my God, so many DC villains are just like, I'm bad because I'm bad. And I don't know, I'm sure someone's gonna get mad at that comment, but that's what I tend to say.
Do you have any advice on crafting compelling characters?
Write a giant synopsis. I know everyone hates them. I talk about them online all the time, but I'm telling you, I write like a 10 to 20 page synopsis for every book that I write. And it makes the storytelling way easier. I can churn out the book way faster, and I know what my characters want, right? I know what their motivation is. I know what they don't like. I know what they're driven by. Write a big synopsis. You're gonna hate it. You're gonna hate it. But I'm telling you, you write a Wikipedia page for your own book in a big Word document, and it's gonna make the process so much easier. And if you get me as a professor in the packet exchange, I'm gonna make you do one. So just get practicing.
Love that. Do you have any advice on good dialogue?
Oh yeah, I do something really weird when it comes to writing dialogue. Here I I read a lot of plays. So I read musicals, I read plays. Uh here's the last 5 years is great. Um I was a theater kid, right? So
Mhm.
like of course this is natural to me and I like reading musicals and plays anyway. But I'm telling you, like read some plays, read some musicals. If you're really struggling and that's not quite for you, pick up some romance novels. Romance novels and rom-coms, even if it's out of your category and genre of choice, people who write rom-coms are masters of banter and masters of dialogue, and they have dialogue that doesn't necessarily move the plot along, but it moves along the character growth in a really interesting way, and you'll learn so much just from reading them. Go treat yourself to an Emily Henry novel. She's wonderful. Her books are great, and you'll learn a lot.
Okay. I never had that answer before, by the way, and I've asked a lot of people that question. I like that.
I'm telling you, plays and musicals, it's a thing.
What advice would you give students who are struggling with pacing in their novels?
Ooh. Struggling with pacing. That's a good question. Usually when one of my books is, excuse me, usually when one of my books has a pace that's dragging, it's because there's something in the book that doesn't belong there,
Mhm.
right? And this happens every time. I will sit down and I'll start reading and I'll get to a section. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to skip over that. And I try to move on to something else. That part that you're skipping over because it's boring yourself,
Mhm.
it can go. You can get rid of it because you obviously don't need it if you're not driven to read your own story there. Um, Also, if you find that your world building is taking the place of the story, right? So like your story should be what pulls the world building along, not the other way around. And when it's the other way around, that's when the pace slows down. When you're spending too much time describing every shrub in the haunted forest or something, right? That's not pulling your book along. That's dragging it back.
I'm laughing because that's my first draft. I always have to go back and thin it out.
But you know what? I think it's better to have way too much than to have too little, right? Because when you have too much, that's when you can go back and do the trimming and make sure all the good stuff is there. So, like, feel free to write too much and then just go back.
What advice do you have on world building?
Oh boy. I think it ties back to me and how I like to ask why for everything, right? Like make sure there's a reason for it, right? Make sure that it is something that informs the entirety of the world, right? That there's like a firm purpose for everything there. I can share a little story. So like my first YA novel is a fantasy novel. It's called Inked. It came out forever ago. And I remember when my editor bought it, and we were going through edits and she was like, so there's a lot of steampunk in this book. I was like, yeah. She's like, why? I was like, because it's cool. And she's like, it's not a reason why to have it. There's no steampunk in that novel now. It came out, nothing in there about it. It cut 30,000 words from the book of me describing the pistons and the gadgets and everything that did not belong in it, right? It didn't inform the world. It had no purpose. It was there for aesthetics. That's not a reason for elements in your world, right? It should do something. So make sure it does something. So you were saying with my agenting and my teaching, and that
Yeah, you're exposed to a lot of new writers.
right.
Between the two, what mistakes are you most often seeing?
Ooh, the mistakes I most often see. Yeah, I feel like the mistakes I see the most are people that just don't know the category that they're writing in or the genre. They'll say like, "Oh, I'm writing a romance novel," and then I start the book and like the love interest is like dead or something. I'm like, well, it's not really gonna work there. Or they're writing, I've written a young adult novel and the main character is like 26. Like it's like really simple mistakes. That like sometimes you don't know any better if you don't have like a writing community or a class like this to sort of learn this stuff from.
Mhm.
Those are the most common mistakes, and they're certainly easy to make if you're not aware of what the market looks like. So we'll make sure you don't make them.
What does the market look like? What are you seeing right now that's doing really well?
Ooh, well, I guess right now everyone wants high concept romantic comedies. So it's a rom-com that does something a little different, maybe a little magic, maybe a little sci-fi somewhere in the mix. High concept romances just in general are really big. I've worked on a couple that have come out recently. Where are you? Where's that book? Ah, there it is. This one just came out this month called The Spy and I. It came out with Berkeley. It's a rom-com that happens to have a lot of action in it. And
Mhm.
then this one came out back in January. It's a science fiction love story about two people trapped around a hadron collider, essentially. So high concept romances, really big. Horror is really big right now. So anything in the horror space, children's books, adult books, you name it, especially in children's books, because I love horror in children's books because it's not so much about being gross and scary as it is teaching kids how to be brave about things, you know? And I think that's such a powerful storytelling, I guess, device there. So yeah, horror, romances. Oh boy. I mean, those are the two big ones right now for me.
Is dark academia still a thing or not so much?
Oh yeah, people always love that.
Okay.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. Are there any websites or tools that you think are essential to helping new writers navigate their own writing journeys?
Oh, tools or websites. I mean, I know a lot when it comes to like the publishing world, those sort of websites. So if you're looking for those kind of resources, I recommend Publishers Marketplace, Publishers Weekly has a great newsletter, Writer's Digest has a great newsletter. I recommend podcasts like Print Run, which is just probably the best industry podcast. The Shit No One Tells You About Writing is a fantastic podcast run by two of my coworkers. Uh,
Mhm.
Let me see. Deadline City is a great podcast if you're into middle grade and young adult books. It's run by Daniel Clayton's Zoraida Cordova. Let's do a lot of industry podcasts. They're very, very helpful. In terms of writing advice, I feel like that's a harder one. I would look up Jamie Attenberg. She runs 1,000 Days of Summer. Wait,
Mhm.
1,100 Days of Summer, which is a great uh like I guess yearly online writing campaign, but she also has a book called 100 Days of Summer that's really, really helpful. I'd look up Charlie Jane Anders. They're a magnificent sci-fi author who they have a book called Never Say You Can't Survive, and it's
Mhm.
probably my favorite book about craft and the writing life, so I would definitely pick that up. And yeah, Jamie Attenberg and Charlie are two good authors to start with, I think.
What advice do you offer students when they start getting rejected by agents and publishers and literary agents? Like, what advice would you offer them on the rejection part of a writing life?
I would say just to keep going, like
Mhm.
please keep going. I look at the clients that I work with in my agent life, and one of them, after we sold her first book, so I signed her, and her first book sold in like 3 months. And she texted me when we saw the pre-order link go live, and we talked about the fact that she had been pitching agents for something like 10 years. It was like a really long time trying to find an agent. And it just had to be the right book, right? And then I have other authors who like started querying, signed with me after a month, and then we sold their book in like 10 days. Like everyone's journey is so wildly different.
Mhm.
And it just has to be the right book at the right time. There's this element of like luck and like publishing alchemy that happens sometimes in this
Mhm.
business. Um, you just have to keep going and find that right person. I feel very fortunate to be the right person for quite a few people, looking at my books right now. But it takes a while. And remember, if you're in the program, I am here to be a resource for you when you start querying agents. Please let me know if you have questions, if you want advice. You can't pitch me, but I feel like it's more valuable to have me as a friend who will advise you for as long as you need.
Love that. Because I imagine your inbox would be like swollen all the time with students.
Yeah, no, my inbox is a bit of a disaster, but I like it.
What's the best piece of writing advice you've ever been given?
Best piece of writing advice. Uh I feel like I don't know if this is gonna register with everybody the way I want it to, but I remember when my first book was coming out, I had an event at BEA, Book Expo America in New York. They don't do it anymore, but it was a big, big festival. It used to be really wonderful. And I was talking to Nicola Yoon. She's the one who wrote Everything,
Everything,
Everything.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, just wonderful, She blurbed one of my books a couple of years ago, and I was asking her, I was like, "What advice do you have for somebody with a first book coming out?" And she told me, she's like, "You know what? Have something else." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "What does that mean?" She's like, "Have something else going on. You don't want to hook everything you got to your life in writing, to the books that you're working on, to the book that maybe you have coming out, or the book that you have that you're pitching around. Because that's just not healthy, right? There's a lot more going on than just that. So have something else, have a fun hobby that you like. I play a lot of video games. I like to garden. I'm terrible at it. Everything dies, but I try my best. I spend a lot of time with my friends and my family. Just make sure there's something else going on. Because really publishing, the whole process is so out of your control, right? Like waiting for people to say yes, waiting for the book to come out, hoping the trade magazines will like it, hoping you get reviews. Like you can't control any of it, right? So like have something else that's in your control. You'll be much happier.
Love that. I love that. Any advice on revision?
Hmm. Um, Say yes to the stuff that works for you and just remember, again, it's the whole we're trying to help you tell the best version of your story thing. So stick with what works, and when it comes to critiques with your colleagues or your cohort or your MFA friends, try to think about where they're coming from with their critique, right? Because you're going to have some people critiquing your books that maybe don't read what you happen to be writing, right? That happens all the time. Take what you can from it. If it doesn't work for you, it's okay. Like I can't tell you how many times I have like a student who's writing fantasy,
Mhm.
and no one in the cohort is writing a fantasy novel,
That
right?
was
And the
me.
critiques, yeah, and the critiques they get back are usually so brutal, and it's very upsetting, and we have to have talks about it.
Mhm.
Um, Take what works for you, and
Mhm.
everything else with a sort of grain of salt there.
That was me.
It's the worst. It's the worst.
Um, but I hear they're getting more fantasy students now. I hear that the following cohorts, it's been a little more.
Excellent. I will probably get you then. You're a fantasy student.
How did you end up agenting in Canada?
So I started my publishing career at Quirk, which is a publisher here in Philly.
Mhm.
I was there for a pretty long time, and I saw the agency opening at PS Literary because I had done the marketing and publicity for two of their clients
Mhm.
at the publishing house. So I reached out and I was like, hey, like I've never been an agent before, but I've worked in publishing for a long time. I have books that I've written. I think I'd be good at it. Can we have a conversation? And they wanted to talk to me. And I have never been to the office. It's been 8 years and I've never gone to the office. That's sort of how it happened. It's the kind of career jump you see a lot of people make when they become agents. It's
Mhm.
from sometimes they come from the author space, sometimes they come from being a lawyer, and sometimes they come from having worked in publishing.
Mhm. Cool. Was it hard to learn? Was it an adjustment? Was it an easy process?
The adjustment period was more the like financial constraints, right? So like agents work on commission, right? So
Mhm.
like got to start selling books to make it a career. So I didn't really sell my first books until a couple of months in, and that doesn't really generate a salary right away. So yeah, that part was difficult. The getting to know editors and getting to pitch books part, that part wasn't difficult because I already knew a bunch of people. I was pretty familiar with the publishing industry and the places the books could potentially go. That part, I don't want to say it was easy, but it wasn't as challenging.
Okay. Is there anything about being part of an MFA program and the realities of publishing that you think new writers should know that we haven't covered yet?
Realities of the MFA program, the realities of publishing. I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't think so. Like generally my concerns when I have friends that are looking at MFA programs or writer buddies, is well, let's talk about the reality of publishing, and do they have faculty and advisors that are part of the current business? Do they have books with major publishers? Do they have experience? If that's not there, that's a problem for that program, in my opinion. And Drexel doesn't have that problem, so
Mhm.
that's not a thing to potentially worry about. Um, I don't know if someone else out there is watching this and thinking about MFA programs, that's the thing to look out for.
Love that. Love that. Any final advice or words of wisdom to share?
Oh, just to take your time. Anyone who's writing and working on your thesis or planning to enter a program like this, generally you have a good 2 years to finish that book. Take your time working on it. This is the time to really just, I don't know, let that book grow and work with critique partners and just polish it up as much as you can. Don't rush it. Don't be that person that waits 3 months before graduation and then you're madly banging out your book. Don't do that. That defeats the purpose of like working together. So yeah, take your time, watch the potential ticking clock there and enjoy it, because these, being in the sort of MFA bubble here where you get to work so closely with people, that doesn't always exist post-graduation and into your career. Like, even for me now, like, my 10th book came out and now I'm working on something new and I have to like email all new critique partners because all my buddies are in different spaces in their career and some don't have time and some have too many kids, and it's a whole thing. So enjoy it while it's here.
Okay.
All right. Well, we will talk soon.
Yep. Have a blessed one.
You too.
Bye.
That wraps up today's Craft Chat Chronicles with J.D.Myall. Thanks for joining us. If you liked the episode, please comment, subscribe, and share. For show notes, writing workshops, and tips, head to jdmyall.com. That's jdmyall.com. While you're there, join JD's mailing list for updates, giveaways, and more. Got